The four black Cadillac Escalades surrounded Eleanor Sullivan's weathered house like wolves circling wounded prey. Armed security guards in tailored suits emerged first, their earpieces crackling with coordinated precision. Then came the lawyers, their Italian leather shoes incongruous against the cracked sidewalk of this forgotten Nebraska street. Eleanor's arthritic fingers trembled as she pulled 9-year-old Lucas tighter against her chest. The boy's thin frame shook, but not from cold. "She's my real family," Lucas screamed, his voice raw with desperation. "Not you, never you!" The lead vehicle's door opened. Thomas Whitmore stepped out, billionaire, tech mogul, absent father, his hollow eyes fixed on the son he'd lost 2 years ago. Tears carved paths down his cancer-gaunt cheeks. "Please," he whispered, the word carrying across the frozen yard. "That's my son." Eleanor raised her chin defiantly. "You'll have to kill me first." The neighbors' phones rose like weapons, recording everything. Perhaps I should explain how we arrived at this moment. Before we continue, please leave a like and let me know which city you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the story. Eleanor Margaret Sullivan had lived 67 years, but truly died 15 years ago when a drunk driver stole her daughter Sarah and grandson Timothy in a single, devastating instant. The small craftsman house on Maple Street stood as a monument to her grief, paint peeling like shed tears, porch boards groaning under the weight of memory. Each morning began the same, a whispered prayer at Sarah's photograph, her fingers tracing the 8-year-old's frozen smile. Each evening ended in the suffocating silence that $1,200 of monthly Social Security couldn't fill. She'd been a pediatric nurse once, before Michael's heart gave out 20 years ago, before tragedy became her only companion. Now she baked bread for ghosts and kept Sarah's room exactly as it was, pink walls, stuffed bears arranged just so, the small bed still made with Disney princess sheets. No one entered that room. No one. Until Lucas. The boy appeared in Millfield 6 months ago like a wraith, 9 years old with bright blue eyes that belonged in a different life, wearing a Salvation Army coat 3 sizes too big. He moved through their working-class neighborhood like smoke, never begging, just surviving. His worn backpack held everything he owned, though Eleanor wouldn't learn until later about the Rolex hidden in his shoe, a $10,000 timepiece that was his only proof of who he'd been before. Lucas Benjamin Whitmore possessed an intelligence that even hunger couldn't dim. He'd been born into privilege, raised in a 40-room mansion where nannies spoke in hushed tones and tutors came daily. But that life ended when his mother Rebecca succumbed to lymphoma 2 years ago, leaving behind a father who buried himself so deep in Whitmore Technologies that he couldn't see his son disappearing before his eyes. Thomas Alexander Whitmore built his company into a $3 billion empire while his son dissolved into shadow. He'd spent $2 million on private investigators, hired former FBI agents, plastered Lucas's face across 48 states. What Thomas didn't know, what the pancreatic cancer diagnosis 6 weeks ago made irrelevant, was that Lucas hadn't been taken. He'd chosen to leave. Millfield, Nebraska, population 8,000, knew nothing of billionaires or broken families that lived in mansions. The town ran on factory shifts and farm schedules, American flags and Friday night football. Eleanor's street hosted pickup trucks and gossiping neighbors, not luxury SUVs and desperate fathers, but beneath the abandoned railroad bridge, where the homeless made camp, where Lucas had made his home, all stories eventually converged. That October afternoon arrived painted in Nebraska gold, the kind of light that made even Eleanor's tired kitchen seem blessed. She was pulling her famous meatloaf from the oven, the recipe her mother had passed down, the one Sarah used to beg for every Sunday when movement caught her eye through the window. A skinny boy was bent over the Henderson's trash can, searching with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd learned to find meals in unlikely places. He couldn't have been older than 9 or 10, drowning in a coat that hung past his knees. But when he straightened and their eyes met across the chain-link fence, Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. Those eyes, God Almighty. Those eyes held the same haunted recognition she saw in her mirror each morning, the look of someone who'd lost everything that mattered and was still, inexplicably, breathing. The boy froze, ready to run. Eleanor moved slowly, deliberately, like she was approaching a wounded animal. She placed a warm plate on her porch meatloaf, green beans, cornbread, then retreated inside. Through her yellowed curtain, she watched him approach with heartbreaking caution. He didn't grab the food and bolt like she'd expected. Instead, this child sat on her top step, bowed his head, and said grace. His lips moved in silent prayer before he ate with careful, dignified bites, as if someone had once taught him manners in a different lifetime. When Eleanor checked later, the clean plate sat neatly on her welcome mat with a note tucked beneath. "Thank you, ma'am." The handwriting was shaky but determined, each letter formed with effort. She should have called social services, should have notified the authorities about an unaccompanied minor. Instead, Eleanor began leaving food at 4 o'clock each day, as reliable as sunset. The first week, she used the porch. The second week, she moved the plates to her mailbox, giving the boy more distance, more dignity. By the third week, she'd placed them on the bench Michael had built near the sidewalk, where Lucas could eat while watching the world pass by. The gifts started appearing in week 4: a perfect pine cone, a smooth river rock, an origami crane folded from newspaper. Each offering left Eleanor's chest tight with recognition. Sarah used to bring her treasures: 2 dandelions, feathers, pictures drawn in crayon. This boy was trying to pay her back the only way he could, with beauty that cost nothing but attention. The neighbors, naturally, had opinions. "You're encouraging vagrancy, Eleanor," Margaret Henderson declared over the fence, her face pinched with disapproval. "That boy should be in school, not roaming our streets like some feral cat." Robert Peterson was more direct during the neighborhood watch meeting. "That kid could be dangerous, could be casing houses, learning routines. You're putting us all at risk." Eleanor's response came swift and sharp. "Jesus said feed the hungry." He didn't add conditions about checking their school enrollment first. But she did more than feed him. By November, Eleanor started leaving books with the meals started with simple chapter books, then noticed how quickly they were returned. She moved to young adult novels, then classics. Each book came back with a thank you note, and she watched Lucas's handwriting evolve from shaky prints to flowing cursive. His vocabulary expanded, his observations deepened. One note stopped her heart. "The character in this book lost her mother too. Do you ever feel like grief is a room you can never leave? You remind me of someone I used to know." Eleanor clutched that paper and sobbed, because it was November 23rd, Sarah's birthday. Her daughter would have been 23, probably married, maybe with children of her own. Instead, Eleanor was feeding someone else's lost child, and that child had somehow sensed the shape of her sorrow. She wrote back for the first time, leaving her reply with that day's meal. "Grief is indeed a room, but sometimes we find windows. Thank you for being one of mine." The next day, Lucas left an origami swan so intricate it must have taken hours. Inside its wing, written in tiny script, "Windows work both ways." Their strange communion continued through November's end, neither crossing the invisible boundary between feeding and meeting, between kindness and commitment. Eleanor told herself she was simply being charitable. Lucas told himself he was simply surviving. Both were lying, and both knew it. Love, Eleanor had learned, didn't ask permission before taking root. It simply grew in whatever broken soil it found, reaching toward whatever light remained. December 3rd arrived like a predator. The storm descended on Millfield with unusual violence, transforming the Nebraska plains into an Arctic wasteland. By evening, the temperature had plummeted to -10, and the wind howled with enough force to rattle Eleanor's old windows in their frames. The Weather Service called it the worst blizzard in a decade, urging everyone to stay indoors, to check on elderly neighbors, to prepare for power outages. Eleanor couldn't stop thinking about Lucas. She tried to distract herself with television, but every channel showed the same warnings about hypothermia, about how quickly a person could die in these conditions. She attempted to knit, but her hands wouldn't steady. At 10 o'clock, she stood at her kitchen window, watching snow pile against the fence where Lucas usually appeared. The bench where she left his meals had already disappeared under a white drift. "He's found shelter," she told herself. "He's survived this long. He knows what to do. But Sarah's photograph seemed to stare at her from the mantel, and Eleanor heard her daughter's voice as clearly as if she stood in the room. Mama, what if everyone thinks someone else will help? At 11 o'clock, Eleanor made her choice. She pulled on Michael's old wool coat, the one she'd never been able to donate, the one that still smelled faintly of his pipe tobacco. She wrapped her head in scarves, pulled on boots she hadn't worn since Michael's funeral, and grabbed the heavy flashlight from under the sink. The cold hit her like a physical blow. The wind drove ice crystals into every exposed inch of skin, and the snow had already drifted knee-deep in places. Eleanor pushed forward, following the path she'd watched Lucas take so many evenings, moving through the alley behind the grocery store, past the abandoned warehouse, toward the old railroad bridge. She fell twice, her 67-year-old knees screaming in protest. The second time, she lay in the snow for a moment, wondering if anyone would find her body before spring. Then she heard Sarah's voice again, or maybe it was her own conscience. She could never tell the difference and pushed herself upright. The railroad bridge loomed through the blizzard like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast. Beneath its shelter, fires glowed in metal drums, and Eleanor could make out shapes huddled around them. The homeless camp. She'd driven past it countless times, always averting her eyes, always locking her doors. Now she stumbled toward it like a pilgrim approaching a shrine. What the hell? A man emerged from the shadows, grizzled and suspicious. Lady, you lost? I'm looking for a boy, Eleanor gasped through frozen lips. 9 years old, brown hair, blue eyes. His name is Lucas. Ain't no kids here, the man said, but his eyes flickered toward a far corner where the firelight didn't reach. Eleanor pushed past him. Other figures stirred, some calling warnings, some curses. But she didn't care. In the darkest corner, wrapped in newspapers and a torn sleeping bag, she found him. Lucas was burning with fever, his small body shaking violently. His lips moved constantly, calling for his mama, begging someone named Rebecca to come back, to not leave him alone. When Eleanor touched his forehead, her hand nearly recoiled from the heat. This child is dying, she announced to the camp, her voice carrying an authority she hadn't used since her nursing days. An older man, wearing a veteran's cap, stepped forward. Lady, this ain't your business. We take care of our own. Your own? Eleanor's fury gave her strength. This is a child, a sick child, and if you think watching him die under this bridge is taking care of him, then you're no better than the people who walk past you every day pretending you don't exist. She bent and lifted Lucas, his weight nothing compared to the time she'd carried Sarah to bed. But this wasn't her young mother's body anymore. Her knees buckled, her back screamed. The veteran Jake. Someone called him, caught her elbow. You'll never make it back in this storm, Visay, he said. Then I'll die trying. Eleanor adjusted Lucas in her arms. But I'm not leaving him here. Jake studied her for a long moment, then pulled off his own coat and wrapped it around Lucas. Tommy, Marcus, help the lady. And somebody call 911 from the gas station. No hospitals, Eleanor said quickly. No authorities. Please, just help me get him home. 2 younger men flanked her, supporting her when she stumbled, carrying Lucas when her strength failed completely. The journey back took 3 times as long, fighting through drifts that had grown deeper, wind that seemed determined to stop them. Twice Eleanor collapsed entirely, praying desperately not for her own life, but for the strength to save this child. Margaret Henderson was at her window when the strange procession passed Eleanor Sullivan being half-carried by homeless men, a child's limp form between them. To her credit, Margaret ran out in her robe and slippers. Eleanor! My God, what hot water! Eleanor gasped. Blankets. Call Dr. Morrison. Tell him it's an emergency. But no hospital. Please. Margaret. Back in her house, Eleanor's nurse training took over. She stripped Lucas's wet clothes with clinical efficiency, gasping when she found the Rolex, a submariner worth more than her house tucked in his shoe. She ran a lukewarm bath, knowing that heating him too quickly could send him into shock. As she bathed him, she found no signs of abuse, no track marks, nothing but the normal scrapes and bruises of a child who'd been living rough. His backpack, waterlogged but intact, held revelations, 47 letters, each addressed to Dad but never sent. A photograph of Lucas with a man in an obviously expensive suit, both of them smiling on what looked like a yacht, and at the bottom, wrapped in plastic, a birth certificate. Lucas Benjamin Whitmore, born March 15, 2015, San Francisco, California. Eleanor's hands shook as she opened her ancient laptop and typed the name into Google. The results made her sink into Michael's old chair. Thomas Whitmore, founder and CEO of Whitmore Technologies, net worth $3 billion. And headline after headline, tech mogul's son missing for 2 years. Whitmore offers $1 million reward for son's return. FBI joins search for Lucas Whitmore. She could call right now. One phone call would bring helicopters, rewards, media attention. This child belonged to one of the richest men in America. She was nobody, a retired nurse living on Social Security, feeding a runaway who happened to be American royalty. From the bedroom, she heard Lucas cry out, "Don't send me back. Please, I'll be good. Don't send me back." Eleanor abandoned the laptop and went to him. He was delirious, fighting invisible demons, tears streaming down his fevered cheeks. She held him while he thrashed, singing the lullabies she'd once sung to Sarah, and eventually he calmed. With trembling fingers, she opened the letters. The first one, dated 18 months ago. Dear Dad, I know you're busy with the company. I'm okay. The fifth, Dad, I sleep under the stars now. Mom would have liked that. The 20th, Dad, a nice lady feeds me every day. She reminds me of Mom, the way she never asks for anything back. The 38th, Dad, I know you wished I died instead of Mom. It's okay. Sometimes I wish that too. The 47th, dated just last week. Dad, I think I found a grandma. I hope you don't mind. I know Mom's parents are gone, but this lady lost her daughter, and I lost Mom, and maybe that makes us family. Eleanor read them all, tears streaming down her face. This wasn't just a runaway. This was a child so broken by grief that he'd chosen the streets over a home that held too much pain. And now he was here, in Sarah's bed, fighting for his life while his billionaire father searched the world for him. She could call the police. Should call them. It was the legal thing, the right thing, the responsible thing. Instead, Eleanor pulled the blanket higher around Lucas's shoulders, smoothed his damp hair, and made a different choice. She would heal him first. She would feed him, care for him, love him back to life. The questions, the authorities, the billionaire father, all of that could wait. Because tonight, in the middle of the worst blizzard in a decade, Eleanor Sullivan had found her purpose again. And Lucas Whitmore, heir to billions, had found something worth more than all his father's money, someone who chose him not for reward or recognition, but simply because love didn't ask permission before taking root in broken hearts. The fever broke on the third night. Eleanor had barely left Lucas's side. Sleeping in the rocking chair she'd dragged from Sarah's room, waking every hour to check his temperature, to spoon ice chips between his cracked lips, to whisper prayers she hadn't said in 15 years. When his blue eyes finally opened, clear and conscious, she nearly collapsed with relief. "Grandma," he whispered, his voice raw from 3 days of delirious crying. Eleanor's heart shattered and reformed in that single word. She smoothed his damp hair with trembling fingers. "I'm here, sweetheart. You're safe. Did I dream it? The snow, you finding me. No dream, though you gave me quite a scare, young man." Lucas tried to sit up, panic flooding his features. The others, Jake and Tommy, and they're fine. Jake's been by twice to check on you. I've been leaving food for the whole camp at the bridge. She gently pressed him back against the pillows. Rest now. There's soup when you're ready. Over the next week, Eleanor watched Lucas emerge from sickness like a butterfly from a chrysalis. First came the physical healing color returning to his cheeks, strength to his limbs. She fed him constantly chicken soup, homemade bread, the meatloaf he'd grown to love. Dr. Morrison made house calls, prescribing antibiotics, checking Lucas's lungs, asking no questions about insurance or guardianship. Pneumonia, he told Eleanor privately. Another night in that cold and we'd be having a different conversation. You saved his life, Eleanor. But it was the emotional healing that amazed her more. Lucas moved through her house with careful reverence, as if afraid that too much noise or space might break the spell. He helped with dishes without being asked, made his bed with military precision, always said please and thank you. Someone had raised this child right, at least for his first 7 years. On the 7th day, Eleanor opened Sarah's bedroom door. Would you like to sleep in a real bed? Lucas stood at the threshold, taking in the pink walls, the stuffed animals, the bookshelf still filled with children's stories. Was this hers? My daughter Sarah's. She would have been 23 now. What happened to her? Eleanor's usual response was to deflect, to change the subject. But something about Lucas's solemn attention made her speak. Car accident, 15 years ago. She was 8. My grandson Timothy was with her. He was only 3. Lucas walked slowly into the room, touching the desk, the lamp, finally picking up a photograph of Sarah in her soccer uniform. She looks happy. She was sunshine itself. My mom was too, Lucas said quietly. Before the cancer. That night, for the first time in 15 years, someone slept in Sarah's bed. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching Lucas curl up among the stuffed bears, and felt something frozen inside her begin to thaw. The second week brought revelations. Lucas had fought the fever and won, but nightmares still clawed at him each night. Eleanor would wake to his screaming, find him twisted in sweat-soaked sheets, calling for his mother, begging his father not to leave him. Talk to me, she said one morning, after a particularly bad night. Tell me what happened. Lucas stared into his hot chocolate, marshmallows melting into white swirls. Mom got sick when I was 7, lymphoma. Dad threw everything at it, best doctors, experimental treatments, flew her to specialists in Switzerland. Nothing worked. Eleanor waited, patient as stone. She died 2 years ago. Dad, broke. He'd stand in her room for hours, just staring at her things. Then one day he packed everything away, fired most of the staff, and went back to work. 18-hour days. Sometimes he didn't come home at all. And you, nannies, tutors, drivers. I had everything except... Lucas's voice cracked. One night, I couldn't sleep. I went to Dad's study. The door was cracked open and I heard him on the phone with someone. He was crying. Really crying. And he said he wished God had taken him instead of Mom. That it should have been him, not her. That everything would be better if he died instead. Eleanor's chest tightened. Oh, honey. He didn't mean... I know what I heard. Lucas's eyes flashed with pain. So I left. I took some money from my trust fund account. I knew the password and I left. Figured if I wasn't there, maybe he could pretend I died with Mom. Maybe that would make him happy. Lucas, parents say things when they're grieving. For 6 months, I lived in San Francisco. Then the money ran out and I had to get creative. Shelters, churches, sometimes the street. I learned to dumpster dive, to find the restaurants that threw out good food. I headed east because winter in San Francisco was getting dangerous for homeless kids. Took me a year to get to Nebraska. Why here? Lucas shrugged. I liked the name, Millfield. Sounded peaceful. Like somewhere people might leave you alone. Eleanor absorbed this, understanding filling the gaps. Your father, Thomas Whitmore. He's been searching for you. Lucas went rigid. You looked me up. The night I brought you home. There's $1 million reward. The boy pushed back from the table, ready to run. Eleanor caught his wrist gently. I haven't called anyone. I won't. Unless you want me to. Why? Lucas's voice was barely a whisper. Because, Eleanor said slowly, I know what it's like to lose everything. And I know that sometimes the family we choose is more real than the one we're born into. By the third week, they'd developed routines that felt like they'd existed forever. Breakfast at 7, always oatmeal with cinnamon on Mondays, pancakes on Sundays. Eleanor enrolled Lucas in homeschooling, discovering a mind that devoured information like drought-stricken earth absorbs rain. He read at a 12th grade level, solved mathematical equations that left Eleanor dizzy, could discuss history and science with startling sophistication. Private tutors since I was 3, he explained, embarrassed by Eleanor's amazement. Dad believed in optimization, but there were gaps in his education. He didn't know how to cook, had never planted a garden, couldn't sew a button. Eleanor taught him to knead bread dough, to know when tomatoes were ripe, to thread a needle. Lucas taught her chess, origami, how to use the laptop properly. You're scary smart, Eleanor told him one evening as he fixed her computer's virus problem. Mom used to say intelligence without kindness is just a weapon. Lucas replied. She said the heart was more important than the head. Your mother sounds like she was wonderful. She was. Dad was different when she was alive. He laughed. He took weekends off. We went camping. Lucas's fingers stilled on the keyboard. Sometimes I dream she's still alive, and this is all just a nightmare. Then I wake up and remember she's gone, and Dad's gone in a different way. And I'm here with you. And I don't know if I'm supposed to feel guilty for being happy. Eleanor pulled him into a fierce hug. You're supposed to feel whatever you feel. Happiness isn't a betrayal of grief. It's proof that love keeps growing. The investigation started in their 4th week together. Eleanor noticed at first a black sedan parked too long across the street, the same man appearing at the grocery store, the library, always watching. Marcus Stone was good at his job, but Eleanor had spent 15 years studying the faces of grief and loss. She recognized a hunter when she saw one. We're being watched, she told Lucas one evening. The boy went pale. Private investigator. Dad hired dozens of them. What do you want to do? Lucas considered. Can we have Christmas first, just one normal Christmas? Eleanor's heart broke a little more. Of course we can. They threw themselves into holiday preparations with desperate joy. Eleanor taught Lucas to make sugar cookies using her grandmother's recipe, showing him how to roll the dough just right, how to cut shapes with vintage cookie cutters Sarah had loved. Lucas made paper snowflakes so intricate they looked like lace, hanging them in every window. Together they chose a tree from the Methodist church lot, Lucas insisting on paying with money he'd earned helping Jake and the others with odd jobs. It's crooked, Eleanor laughed as they struggled to straighten it in the stand. Perfect things are boring, Lucas declared, stepping back to admire their lopsided pine. This tree has character. They decorated with Eleanor's ancient ornaments, each one carrying a story. The glass angel Michael bought their first Christmas. The popsicle stick star Sarah made in kindergarten. The photo ornament with Timothy's baby picture. Lucas listened to each memory, then carefully hung every piece. Margaret Henderson stopped by with a fruitcake nobody would eat and gossip everyone already knew. The whole town's talking about your boy, she said, eyeing Lucas as he sat reading in Michael's old chair. He's not my boy, Eleanor said carefully. He's just staying for a while. Margaret snorted. Eleanor Sullivan, I've known you 40 years. That child looks at you like you hung the moon, and you look at him like Sarah came back. Don't insult my intelligence. After Margaret left, Eleanor found Lucas at the kitchen table, making something with colored paper and glue. Christmas present, he said shyly. Don't look. She turned away, smiling, then froze when she heard him whisper, This is for Grandma, my grandma. The word hit different when he claimed it, when he claimed her. Robert Peterson proved less charitable, cornering Eleanor at the post office. You know there's talk about calling child services that boy should be in school, in a proper home. He's being homeschooled. He's safe, fed, and cared for by someone his family. You could be preventing him from being with blood relatives. Eleanor's temper, usually dormant, flared to life. Blood doesn't make family. Robert, love does, care does, showing up every day does. If you're so concerned about proper homes, why don't you volunteer at the shelter? Feed someone at the bridge? Or is your Christianity only good for judging others? She left him speechless, but knew the clock was ticking. Marcus Stone was closing in. The town was dividing, some supporting her, others suspicious, and somewhere in California, a billionaire father was still searching for his son. Christmas Eve arrived with fresh snow and tentative hope. Eleanor and Lucas attended the evening service at First Methodist, sitting in the back row until Reverend Williams called Lucas forward. "I heard we have a young man with the voice of an angel. Lucas, would you honor us with a song?" Lucas looked at Eleanor, terrified. She nodded encouragement. He walked to the front like he was approaching his execution, then opened his mouth and sang Silent Night with such pure, aching beauty that the congregation fell silent. His voice carried all the loss and love of his short life, transforming the simple carol into something transcendent. The last note hung in the air like a prayer. Then Margaret Henderson stood up, tears streaming down her face, and began to clap. Others followed, the applause building until the whole church was on its feet. Lucas stood there, surprised and overwhelmed, until Eleanor walked forward and took his hand. "That was for my mom," he whispered. "She loved that song." "She heard it," Eleanor whispered back. "They all did." Later, at home, they sat by their crooked tree, sipping hot chocolate and watching snow fall past the windows. Lucas handed Eleanor a wrapped box, nervous and excited. Inside was a wooden jewelry box he'd made himself rough and imperfect, but crafted with obvious love. Inside the lid, he'd glued a photo Jake had taken of them at the bridge, delivering Christmas dinners to the camp. Beneath it, in careful script, "Family isn't blood. It's who shows up. Merry Christmas. Grandma. Love. Lucas." Eleanor couldn't speak through her tears. Instead, she pulled out her own gift, a sweater she'd knitted in secret, with grandson stitched across the front in blue. "It's official then?" Lucas asked, holding the sweater like it was made of gold. "If you'll have me?" Eleanor said, "Forever." Lucas promised. They didn't know that 300 miles away. Thomas Whitmore sat in his empty mansion, staring at a photo of Lucas while cancer ate him alive. They didn't know that Marcus Stone had just filed his report. Boy located, living with Eleanor Sullivan, appears safe and cared for, awaiting instructions. They didn't know that in 2 days, their fragile peace would shatter. But for that Christmas Eve, they had each other. A 67-year-old woman who'd lost everything, and a 9-year-old boy who'd chosen to disappear, had somehow found their way to each other, creating a family from the broken pieces of their hearts. Outside, snow continued to fall, blanketing Millfield in white. Inside, Eleanor and Lucas sat together, the grandson she'd chosen and the grandmother he'd found, proving that sometimes love didn't follow bloodlines or logic. Sometimes it simply grew where it was needed most, in the spaces between loss and hope, in the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. The investigation would intensify. The truth would surface. The world would intrude. But tonight, they were home. December 26th arrived with deceptive calm. Eleanor woke early, finding Lucas already in the kitchen, making scrambled eggs with the patience she'd taught him, each movement careful and precise. They'd spent Christmas Day in perfect peace playing board games, reading together, calling Jake at the bridge to check on everyone. The sweater Eleanor had knitted fit Lucas perfectly, and he'd worn it to bed, refusing to take it off even for his bath. "Morning, Grandma," he said without turning around. "I made coffee the way you like it." Eleanor accepted the mug, noting how his hands trembled slightly. "You feel it too." "Something's coming," Lucas whispered. "I can always tell, like before a storm, but different." At 7 o'clock exactly, the doorbell rang. They both froze. Nobody visited this early, especially not the day after Christmas. Eleanor looked through the peephole and felt her blood turn to ice. 4 black Cadillac Escalades sat in her driveway and along the street, their engines running, exhaust creating white clouds in the frigid morning air. Men in dark suits stood at strategic points, shoulders broad, earpieces visible, hands positioned to reach weapons if necessary. On her porch stood 3 men. The first was Marcus Stone, whom she recognized from his surveillance. The second was clearly a lawyer Armani suit, leather briefcase, tablet in hand. The third made her gasp. Even through the peephole, she could see death written on Thomas Whitmore's face. The photos online had shown a robust tech mogul, tall and commanding. This man was gaunt, his expensive suit hanging loose, his skin with the gray pallor she recognized from her nursing days. Pancreatic cancer, late stage, maybe weeks left, probably not months. "Mrs. Sullivan," Marcus Stone called through the door. "We know Lucas is inside. We're here peacefully. Mr. Whitmore just wants to see his son." Eleanor's hand went to the deadbolt, but Lucas caught her wrist. "Don't," he whispered. "Please, not yet." "Eleanor Sullivan." The lawyer's voice carried authority. "I'm James Crawford, representing Thomas Whitmore. We have legal custody papers. Lucas Whitmore is a minor child who's been missing for 2 years. You're harboring a runaway. If you don't open this door, we'll have no choice but to involve law enforcement." Eleanor looked at Lucas. The boy stood straight, chin raised, but tears were already streaming down his face. "I won't let them take you against your will," she promised. "You can't stop them," Lucas said quietly. "He's my father. He has rights." "You have rights too." The doorbell rang again, more insistent. Through the window, Eleanor could see neighbors emerging from their houses, drawn by the spectacle of luxury vehicles on their working-class street. Margaret Henderson was already on her porch, phone raised, recording everything. Eleanor opened the door but kept the chain on. "Mr. Whitmore?" Thomas Whitmore stepped forward, and up close. The devastation was even clearer. This wasn't just cancer eating at him, this was grief, guilt, and desperation carved into every line of his face. "Please," he said, his voice breaking. "That's my son. I just want to see him. I've been searching for 2 years. Do you have any idea what it's like to lose your child? To not know if they're alive or dead?" Eleanor almost laughed at the bitter irony. "Actually, Mr. Whitmore, I do. I lost my daughter and grandson 15 years ago. The difference is, I know where they are." "They're in Riverside Cemetery, plot 447, Thomas flinched. "I'm sorry for your loss, but Lucas is alive. He's my son. Please." "She's my real family." The scream came from behind Eleanor. Lucas stood in the hallway, his whole body shaking with rage and fear. "She's my real family," he repeated. "Not you, never you. You stopped being my father when Mom died." Thomas's legs nearly buckled. Marcus Stone steadied him. "Lucas," Thomas whispered. "Son, please. I know I failed you. I know I wasn't there. But I never stopped loving you. I never stopped searching." "Liar!" Lucas screamed. "You wished I died instead of Mom, I heard you." The words hit Thomas like physical blows. He gripped the door frame, his face crumbling. "No," he gasped. "No, Lucas, you misunderstood. I said I wished I had died instead of her. Me, not you, never you." But Lucas was beyond listening. He ran to Eleanor, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face against her. "You'll have to kill me first," Eleanor said, echoing her earlier defiance, pulling Lucas tighter against her. Crawford, the lawyer, stepped forward. "Mrs. Sullivan, I understand this is emotional, but the law is clear. Thomas Whitmore has full custody rights. Lucas is his biological son. You have no legal standing here. If you continue to interfere, You'll be charged with kidnapping, interference with custody, and potentially federal crime since Lucas crossed state lines. Then charge me, Eleanor snapped. I'm 67 years old. What are you going to do? Send me to federal prison, fine. But you're not taking this child against his will. By now, half the neighborhood had gathered. Robert Peterson pushed through the crowd, his face red with righteousness. Eleanor, be reasonable. The man is his father. You can't keep them apart. Shut up, Robert, Margaret Henderson shot back. Can't you see that child is terrified? The crowd began taking sides, voices rising. Someone called the police. 3 news vans appeared as if summoned by the drama, reporters scrambling out with cameras and microphones. This is kidnapping, someone shouted. This is protection, another voice countered. Sheriff Davidson arrived, looking deeply uncomfortable. He'd known Eleanor for 30 years, had been one of Sarah's softball coaches. Eleanor, he said gently, we need to sort this out properly. Then sort it out, Eleanor said. But Lucas stays with me until a judge decides otherwise. Crawford produced a tablet. We have an emergency custody order from a California judge. This is Nebraska, Eleanor countered. That paper means nothing here without state recognition. Actually, a new voice interrupted. She's correct. Everyone turned to see Judge Patricia Thompson pushing through the crowd, even off duty, wearing jeans and a Christmas sweater from her grandchildren. She commanded respect. Judge Thompson, Crawford began, but she raised a hand. I've been watching this unfold on Margaret's Facebook Live for the past 10 minutes, she said dryly. Mr. Whitmore, Mr. Crawford, you can't simply show up with out-of-state papers and armed security to retrieve a child. This requires proper jurisdiction and procedure. Your Honor, Thomas spoke for the first time in minutes, his voice raw. I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. The doctors gave me 6 months, but that was 6 weeks ago. I just want my son. I need to make things right before. His voice broke entirely. Judge Thompson studied him, then looked at Lucas, still clinging to Eleanor. Lucas, she said gently, I need to hear from you. Can you talk to me? Lucas slowly turned, though he kept one hand fisted in Eleanor's sweater. She saved me, he said simply. When I was dying under that bridge, she saved me. When I had nightmares, she held me. When I was hungry, she fed me. She never asked for anything. She never tried to use me. She just loved me. And your father? Lucas looked directly at Thomas for the first time. He buried himself with Mom. I became a ghost in my own house. Nannies, tutors, drivers, everyone but him. Do you know what it's like to lose both parents, but only one dies? Thomas made a sound like a wounded animal. But that's not why I left, Lucas continued, his young voice carrying across the silent crowd. I left because I found his suicide note. The revelation hit like a bomb. Thomas went white. Crawford stepped back. Even Marcus Stone looked shocked. What? Thomas gasped. June 15th, 2 years ago. Lucas said with terrible precision. You left it on your desk. I could read. You know, I've always been able to read above my age. You detailed exactly how you were going to do it. Pills from Mom's leftover prescriptions. You even picked the date, June 20th, the anniversary of Mom's diagnosis. Eleanor felt the world shift. This changed everything. I took the note, Lucas continued. I took the pills too, flushed them all. Then I left. Because I figured if you had to look for me, you'd have a reason to keep living. If I became lost, maybe you'd find yourself. Thomas collapsed to his knees on Eleanor's porch, sobbing great, wrenching sobs that seemed to tear from his very soul. I became lost so you would find yourself, Lucas repeated. But you just found more work instead, more money, more everything except what mattered. The crowd stood frozen. The reporters had lowered their cameras, some crying themselves. Even Crawford, the lawyer, seemed at a loss. Judge Thompson cleared her throat. This is clearly a complex situation requiring immediate but careful consideration. I'm ordering an emergency hearing for tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Until then, Lucas remains where he is. Mr. Whitmore, you and your team need to leave this property. Sheriff Davidson, please ensure compliance. Your Honor, Crawford began to protest. Counselor, Judge Thompson cut him off. Your client just learned his 9-year-old son has been carrying the weight of preventing his suicide for 2 years. Perhaps instead of legal maneuvering, Mr. Whitmore might benefit from processing that information. Thomas hadn't moved from his knees. He looked up at Lucas, his face destroyed. You saved my life, he whispered. No, Lucas said flatly. I just postponed your death. There's a difference. The cruelty of the words from such a young mouth made everyone flinch, but Lucas wasn't finished. You have cancer now. Real cancer. Not the grief kind. So you're dying anyway. And now you want me back. Now. When you have months left. Where were you for 2 years? Where were you when I ate from dumpsters? When I slept in the rain? When I got so sick I thought I was dying? I was looking for you, Thomas said desperately. Every day, every night. I hired everyone, spent everything. You were looking for your guilt. Lucas interrupted. Not for me. If you were looking for me, you would have looked inside yourself first. You would have asked why a 7-year-old boy would choose the streets over his own home. Eleanor finally spoke. Lucas, that's enough. The boy looked up at her, surprised. Pain doesn't heal pain, she said gently, and cruelty doesn't cure grief. Your father made mistakes, terrible mistakes, but he's here now, because he's dying. Yes, Eleanor agreed, but also because he loves you. Both things can be true. She looked at Thomas, still on his knees. Mr. Whitmore, get up. Have some dignity. Your son needs to see you strong, not broken. Thomas struggled to his feet, Marcus Stone helping him. 24 hours, Eleanor said. Judge Thompson has given us 24 hours. Go to your hotel. Think about what you really want, not what your lawyers say, not what your money can buy, what you really want for Lucas. Because I'll tell you right now, if you try to rip him away from me, you'll destroy him, and yourself. Thomas nodded slowly. Can I say something to him, please? Eleanor looked at Lucas, who gave the tiniest nod. Thomas stepped closer, but didn't try to touch his son. Lucas, I'm sorry. For everything. For failing you when Mom died. For not seeing your pain through my own. For becoming the kind of father who needed to lose his son to remember he had one. You're right, you did save my life. The night you disappeared. I was going to try again. But I couldn't. Not until I found you. You gave me purpose when I had none. That's not fair to put on a child. I know. But it's the truth. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. A carved wooden horse, worn smooth from handling. You probably don't remember this. You made it for me when you were 5. Mom helped you. You said it would help me get places faster. His voice cracked. I've carried it every day since you left. It's the only thing that kept me moving forward. Lucas stared at the horse, and for the first time, his angry facade cracked. I remember, he whispered. Thomas set the horse on Eleanor's porch rail. I'll see you tomorrow. Whatever you decide, whatever happens, I love you. I've loved you every second of every day, even when I was too broken to show it. He turned and walked back to the SUV, each step seeming to take enormous effort. Crawford started to follow, then turned back. Mrs. Sullivan, you should retain counsel. This won't end here. I know, Eleanor said simply. The vehicles pulled away, leaving the neighborhood in stunned silence. The reporters rushed forward, but Sheriff Davidson held them back. Give them space, he ordered. This is a family matter, not entertainment. Margaret Henderson stepped onto Eleanor's porch. Eleanor, I'm sorry for every nasty thing I ever said. That boy belongs with you. Robert Peterson, surprisingly, nodded. The whole neighborhood will testify on your behalf. Others voiced agreement, but Eleanor barely heard them. She was focused on Lucas, who stood staring at the wooden horse on the rail. I made that when Mom could still help me, he said quietly. Before the cancer got bad, she said Daddy needed something special from me to keep at his office. We spent 3 days on it. Do you want to keep it? Lucas picked up the horse, running his fingers over its smooth surface. Did I do the wrong thing running away? Eleanor pulled him close. There's no right or wrong here, sweetheart. Just pain trying to find its way to healing. I don't want to leave you, Lucas whispered. But I don't want him to die alone either. Then we'll figure out a way for both things to be true, Eleanor promised. Love multiplies. Remember, it doesn't divide. As the crowd dispersed and the reporters reluctantly left, Eleanor and Lucas went back inside. The wooden horse sat on the kitchen table between them, a tiny bridge between past and present, between the family Lucas was born into and the one he'd chosen. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and judges, arguments and decisions. But tonight, they had each other and the knowledge that sometimes love appears in the most unexpected ways, in a homeless boy's gratitude, in an old woman's grace, in a dying father's desperate hope. The real battle hadn't even begun. The emergency hearing never happened. At 3 a.m, Eleanor's phone rang with the call that changed everything. Marcus Stone's voice was professional but strained. Mrs. Sullivan? Thomas Whitmore collapsed at the hotel. He's at Millfield General. The doctors? It doesn't look good. Eleanor found Lucas already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with the wooden horse clutched in his hands. I felt it, he whispered. Like when Mom got really sick. The air changes. We should go to the hospital, Eleanor said gently. No. Lucas's voice was flat, final. He's not my father anymore. He's just DNA that happens to match mine. Lucas, would you visit someone who abandoned you? The boy's eyes blazed with hurt disguised as anger. Would you hold the hand of someone who chose work over watching you grow up? Eleanor sat down across from him. Yes, she said simply. Because forgiveness isn't for them, it's for us. Carrying hate is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Lucas turned away. Then I choose poison. The news of Thomas's collapse spread through Millfield like wildfire. By noon, the state had intervened in what was becoming a circus. Patricia Caldwell from Child Protective Services arrived at Eleanor's door with a thick folder and a grim expression. Mrs. Sullivan, I'm here to assess Lucas's living situation. He's safe, fed, educated, and loved, Eleanor said firmly. I don't doubt that, but you're 67 years old with a heart condition. Thomas Whitmore is dying. Neither of you is considered an ideal guardian by state standards. Then what are you suggesting? Caldwell's expression softened slightly. Foster care, a younger family, properly vetted, with experience in trauma cases. Over my dead body, Eleanor said. That's exactly what we're trying to prevent. Caldwell replied. What happens to Lucas if something happens to you? You have no legal claim to him, no formal arrangement. You're one fall, one heart attack, one stroke away from leaving him completely alone. That afternoon, while Eleanor met with a lawyer Margaret Henderson had found, Lucas slipped out the back door. He'd done it before, knew how to move without sound, how to disappear into the spaces adults didn't think to look. But this time, he wasn't running to survive. He was running toward an ending. Jake found him at Riverside Cemetery, kneeling between 2 graves, one marked Rebecca Ann Whitmore, the other Sarah Elizabeth Sullivan. Figured you'd be here, Jake said, lowering himself onto the cold ground with a grunt. Your grandma's looking for you. Half the town's out searching. She's not my grandma, Lucas said dully. Not really. I'm nobody's nothing. That's bull, and you know it. Lucas traced his mother's name with one finger. Mom's here. Sarah's here, too. Maybe I should be with them. It would be easier. Jake grabbed the boy's shoulder, not gently. Listen up, kid. I've been where you are. Hell, I've been lower. After Nam, I ate my gun 3 times. You know what stopped me? Lucas shook his head. The thought that my dying would be just another waste, another pointless casualty. Your mama didn't fight cancer for 2 years so you could quit at 9. That lady who loves you didn't save your life so you could throw it away. Everyone wants to own me, Lucas whispered. Dad, the state, even Eleanor. But nobody asks what I want. So what do you want? I want my mom back. I want Dad to be who he was before. I want to stay with Eleanor without lawyers and judges. I want impossible things. Jake pulled out a flask, took a sip, then put it away. Life's mostly about accepting what's possible when impossible don't work out. Your dad's dying, kid. Whatever he did or didn't do, man's got weeks at best. You can hate him for the rest of your life, but that life will be a lot longer than his. Sheriff Davidson found them an hour later, Lucas asleep against Jake's shoulder, exhausted from crying. Eleanor arrived minutes behind, having ignored doctor's orders to rest after her own blood pressure spike. Thank God, she breathed, pulling Lucas into her arms. I wasn't going to do it. Lucas mumbled against her shoulder. I just wanted to see Mom. I know, baby. I know. But Child Services didn't know, or didn't care. The incident was logged as a potential suicide risk. Combined with Eleanor's age and health, Thomas's terminal condition, and the custody chaos, Patricia Caldwell made her determination. Lucas will be placed in temporary foster care while the courts decide permanent placement. The community exploded within hours. Millfield divided into bitter factions. Those supporting Eleanor spray-painted justice for Grandma on the courthouse. Those believing in biological rights left signs in Eleanor's yard, "Kidnap her and give him back." Thomas, barely conscious in his hospital bed, received death threats from both sides, either for abandoning his son or for trying to reclaim him. The ugliness peaked on Sunday when Eleanor arrived at First Methodist for service. Reverend Williams met her at the door, his face pained. Eleanor, the board has decided, until this matter is resolved, it would be better if you worshipped from home. You're refusing me communion, Eleanor's voice carried across the parking lot. For loving a child, for interfering with God's natural order, Robert Peterson called out. Children belong with their blood parents. Then where were you when his blood parent let him starve on the streets? Eleanor shot back. The confrontation made the evening news. Team Eleanor and Team Thomas hashtags trended nationally. Lucas, watching from his temporary foster home, saw it all on the Johnsons' television, nice people who meant well but treated him like a ticking bomb. On the 10th day, James Crawford arrived at Eleanor's house with a banker's box. Mr. Whitmore wanted you to see these, he said simply. Inside were dozens of small videotapes, dated starting the night Lucas disappeared. Eleanor's hands shook as she inserted the first one into her old VCR. Thomas appeared on screen, looking nothing like the broken man in the hospital. This was 2 years ago, successful, polished, trying to hold himself together. Lucas, it's day 1. You've been gone 14 hours. I know you'll be home soon, but I need to tell you, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I love you, son. The next tape, day 5. Lucas, the police think someone took you, but I know better. I found your piggy bank broken, your backpack gone. You left, didn't you? Because of me. I'm going to find you, and when I do, I'll be better. I promise. Day 30. Lucas, I sold my car collection today. The investigators need more resources. Your mom loved those cars, but she loved you more. I love you more. Day 100. I resigned as CEO today. The board fought me, but I don't care. Finding you is my only job now. Day 365. It's been a year, Lucas. Everyone says to accept you might be gone, but I know you're out there. You're too smart, too strong. Your mother's son. I love you. K500. I dream about you every night. Sometimes you're angry. Sometimes you forgive me. Sometimes you're just eating breakfast. And that's my favorite dream. Just you, eating cereal. Safe. I love you. Son. The last tape was dated a week ago. Lucas, I'm dying. The cancer's winning. But I won't stop looking until my last breath. If you ever see this, know that every second of every day, even when I was too broken to show it, I loved you. You were never unwanted. You were everything. Are everything. I love you, son. Eleanor sat in her dark living room, tears streaming down her face. She'd been wrong. Not about protecting Lucas, but about Thomas. This wasn't a man who'd abandoned his son emotionally. This was a man who'd been drowning in grief, who'd made terrible mistakes, but who'd never stopped loving. She thought of Lucas in that sterile foster home, thought of Thomas dying alone in the hospital, thought of herself in this empty house, 3 broken people, kept apart by pride and pain and legal machinery that couldn't measure love. The next morning, she did something that shocked everyone. She went to the hospital. Thomas was barely recognizable, machines keeping him tethered to life. His eyes fluttered open when she sat down. "Is he okay?" he whispered. "No," Eleanor said honestly. "None of us are. But I watched your tapes." Hope flickered in his dying eyes. "You love him," Eleanor continued. "I see that now. But love isn't enough if it doesn't show up. You failed him, Thomas. Not by grieving his mother, but by disappearing into that grief." "I know," he breathed. "I know. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want your promise. Anything. Stop fighting for custody. Give him up. Let me adopt him legally." Thomas's face crumbled. "He's all I have left of Rebecca." "No," Eleanor said firmly. "He's not a memorial to his mother. He's a living, breathing boy who needs stability. You're dying, Thomas. What happens to him when you're gone? Back to the system. Back to running. I could set up trusts, guardians, money, and lawyers. That's your solution. He needs family, not finance." Thomas was quiet for a long moment. "You love him, like my own blood. And he loves you." "He does. But he's my son," Thomas whispered. "My baby boy. I used to carry him on my shoulders, teach him to ride his bike, read him stories." "And then you stopped," Eleanor said, not unkindly. "I'm not trying to be cruel, Thomas." "But you're running out of time. You can spend your last days in court, or you can spend them showing Lucas who you really are, who you were before grief broke you. He won't see me. Then we make him." Thomas's eyes widened. You're not my enemy?" Eleanor said. "You're a father who lost his way. I'm a mother who lost her child. Lucas is a boy who needs us both to stop fighting over him and start fighting for him. The state won't approve either of us," Thomas said bitterly. "You're too old. I'm dying." "Then we get creative," Eleanor said. "We stop letting lawyers and judges decide what family means. We write our own definition." Outside Thomas's room, Marcus Stone had been listening. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Crawford." "Yeah, it's Stone. We need to try something different." "What? No, not more litigation. Something human." The war for Lucas Whitmore was about to become something else entirely, a last desperate attempt at peace. Jake Hammond had never been one for grand gestures. 20 years living under bridges had taught him to keep his head down, mind his business, survive another day. But watching the news coverage of Lucas's custody battle, seeing the boy portrayed as either a victim or a problem, finally broke his silence. He cleaned himself up as best he could, put on the only decent shirt he owned, and walked into Eleanor Sullivan's house without knocking. "We need to talk," he announced to Eleanor, who was meeting with her lawyer, "about what Lucas don't want anyone to know." Eleanor dismissed the lawyer and sat down. "What are you talking about, Jake? That boy saved my life, literally, and he's been keeping it secret because he's protecting someone." Jake told the story slowly, each word careful. 6 weeks ago, middle of the night, I had a heart attack under that bridge. Real bad one. Couldn't breathe, couldn't move, thought I was done. Then this 9-year-old kid appears out of nowhere, starts doing CPR like he's been trained for it. Lucas knows CPR. Said he learned it from YouTube. Watched videos over and over after his mama died, in case someone needed it. Kid pumped my chest for 10 minutes straight. Wouldn't stop even when his arms were shaking. Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "That's not all," Jake continued. "When I came around, I needed medication. Nitroglycerin. Expensive stuff. No insurance. No money. Lucas pulls out a credit card, Black American Express. The kind rich folks have. Said it was his dad's. Memorized the numbers before he ran away. He used it to buy my medication from the 24-hour pharmacy. Thomas's card, but that would have given away his location. Yeah, the kid knew it. Soon as the transaction went through, he destroyed the card. But here's the thing, he had to give the pharmacy an address for the prescription. He gave them the bridge location. Eleanor stood up sharply. That's how Thomas's investigator found him. Lucas chose to be found, Jake said. Not for himself, for me. He risked his freedom to save some worthless old vet he'd known for a few months. Then, when help started closing in, instead of running again, he made sure someone you would find him first. Eleanor sank back into her chair. He never said anything. Course not. Kid don't want credit, don't want anyone feeling obligated. He just does what's right and moves on. That's why I'm here. Someone needs to know who Lucas Whitmore really is. Not the runaway, not the victim. He's the kid who saves people. That afternoon, Thomas Whitmore shocked everyone by calling his own press conference from his hospital bed. Crawford had advised against it, but Thomas insisted on speaking directly to the cameras. I've spent $3 billion building a technology empire, he began, his voice weak but clear. I've spent $2 million searching for my son. Today, I'm announcing that I'm giving it all away. The reporters erupted with questions, but Thomas continued. Every penny will go to establishing Rebecca's house, a national network of grief counseling centers for families who've lost someone to cancer. My wife fought for 2 years. My son has been fighting alone ever since. No family should face that darkness without help. A reporter shouted, What about Lucas, your son? Lucas already has what he needs, a grandmother who loves him unconditionally. Eleanor Sullivan saved my son's life. She gave him what I couldn't: stability, presence, unconditional love. Today, I'm formally requesting that she be granted full adoptive rights. You're giving up your son, another reporter asked, scandalized. I'm giving him what he needs, Thomas corrected. A real parent. I had my chance and I failed. Love means knowing when to let go. Crawford stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore will also be establishing a trust for Lucas's education and future, managed by Mrs. Sullivan. This isn't about abandonment. It's about putting a child's needs before adult pride. The press conference sent shockwaves through the legal proceedings. But the universe had one more card to play. That evening, Eleanor was reviewing Thomas's proposal when pain shot through her chest. She managed to call 911 before collapsing. Lucas, who'd been returned to her custody pending the hearing, found her unconscious on the kitchen floor. Grandma, no. He started CPR immediately, counting compressions just like he'd done with Jake, pumping her chest with desperate precision until the paramedics arrived. At the hospital, Doctor. Morrison delivered the diagnosis. Severe coronary artery disease. She needs surgery, but without insurance. How much? Lucas asked, his voice eerily calm. $30,000, minimum. Lucas walked out of the room and found Marcus Stone in the waiting area. Get my father. It was the first time he'd used that word in months. Thomas was wheeled in, IV pole trailing, looking more ghost than man. She needs surgery, Lucas said without preamble. You have money. I'll pay for everything, Thomas said immediately. No, Lucas's voice was firm. Not as charity, as a trade. What kind of trade? You pay for her surgery, every medical bill for the rest of her life. In exchange, I'll spend time with you. Real time. Not forced by courts, but chosen. 1 hour for every $1,000 you spend on her. Thomas's eyes filled with tears. You're negotiating visitation based on medical bills. I'm being practical. You taught me that. Everything has a value, right? Well, Eleanor's life is worth $30,000 and 30 hours of my time. Deal. Lucas, I don't want you to... Deal or no deal? Lucas interrupted. She's dying. You're dying. I'm tired of losing people. So are we doing this or not? Deal. Thomas whispered. Crawford documented everything on his phone, creating a legally binding verbal contract. Within an hour, Eleanor was in surgery, with the best cardiac team in the state. While Eleanor recovered, Judge Thompson convened an emergency session in her hospital room. The small space was crowded with lawyers, social workers, and witnesses. This is highly irregular, she began. But then again, nothing about this case has been regular. She looked at Thomas, skeletal in his wheelchair. Then at Eleanor, pale but alert in her hospital bed. Finally at Lucas, sitting between them, holding both their hands. Mr. Whitmore, you're withdrawing all custody claims. Yes, Your Honor. I want Eleanor Sullivan to be Lucas's legal mother. Mrs. Sullivan, you're willing to accept this responsibility despite your recent health issues. I am. But I have conditions. Everyone leaned forward. Thomas remains Lucas's father. Not legally, but actually. He lives with us for whatever time he has left. Lucas needs to know his father, the real one, not the broken one. Thomas needs to know his son again, and I need help raising a brilliant 9-year-old who's too smart for his own good. That's not how custody works, Patricia Caldwell protested. Then change how it works, Eleanor shot back. This boy has 2 dying parents and 1 dying grandmother. We can spend our last months or years fighting, or we can spend them together. Lucas doesn't need ownership. He needs family. Judge Thompson was quiet for a long moment. Lucas, what do you want? The boy looked at Thomas, then at Eleanor, then at the judge. I want to stop choosing. I want them both. Mom's dead. Sarah's dead. Timothy's dead. Do we really need more loss? Can't we just stop losing for once? Thomas reached over and took Eleanor's hand. Partners. Partners. She agreed. Judge Thompson made her decision. I'm ordering a unique arrangement. Shared custody between Eleanor Sullivan and Thomas Whitmore. With the following provisions, all 3 must live in the same residence. All 3 must attend weekly family therapy, and all 3 must complete 100 hours of community service together at the homeless shelter. Your Honor, Crawford began. Counselor, I've been a judge for 20 years. I've never seen a case where the letter of the law and the spirit of justice were so at odds. Sometimes, we need to create new precedents. This child has chosen his family. The least we can do is respect that choice. Patricia Caldwell stood up. The state objects. This is completely unprecedented. Good, Judge Thompson replied. Maybe it's time we stopped treating children like property to be awarded and started treating them like people to be heard. The media went crazy. Legal experts debated the decision on every channel. Some called it revolutionary, others called it reckless. But in that hospital room, 3 broken people had found a way to become whole. That evening, Thomas was wheeled into Eleanor's room permanently. They set up a second bed for him, with Lucas's cot between them. The nurses thought it was insane. The doctors predicted disaster. The lawyers prepared for inevitable complications. But Lucas sat between his 2 parents, one by blood, one by choice, and read aloud from Charlotte's Web, a book both Eleanor and Thomas remembered reading to their lost children. His voice carried through the hospital halls, a sound of something rare and precious, a family being born from the ashes of tragedy. Outside, snow began to fall again. But inside, for the first time in years, all 3 of them were warm. 6 months passed, like a season of grace. Eleanor's small house had been modestly expanded with Thomas's money, just enough for a proper bedroom and a wheelchair-accessible bathroom. Thomas insisted on keeping Eleanor's humble style, saying he'd lived in enough mansions to know they couldn't hold happiness. He learned to cook Eleanor's meatloaf recipe, his trembling hands guided by hers. She taught him to plant tomatoes, though they both knew he'd never see them ripen. Lucas taught them both to play video games, their laughter echoing through rooms that had been silent too long. Eleanor learned the hardest lesson: forgiveness, not just of Thomas, but of herself. For all the years she'd spent dying instead of living after Sarah's death, Thomas's final days came in July, peaceful as summer rain. Lucas read to him every night Harry Potter, because Thomas had always meant to read them with his son. Eleanor held his hand through the pain, singing the lullabies she'd once sung to Sarah, that she now sang to Lucas. His last coherent day was at Lucas's Little League game. Thomas sat in his wheelchair, wrapped in blankets despite the heat, cheering weakly as Lucas hit his first home run. "Thank you," he whispered to Eleanor as Lucas rounded third base. "Thank you for saving us both." He died that night, Lucas and Eleanor beside him, his hand holding the wooden horse his son had carved so long ago. They buried him next to Rebecca in Millfield Cemetery, a billionaire laid to rest in a small town that had become his true home. Lucas inherited $3 billion but refused most of it. Instead, he established Eleanor's Kitchen, which fed 500 homeless people daily. Jake ran it with military precision and unexpected tenderness. The wooden sign above the door read, "Love multiplies when shared." Eleanor officially adopted Lucas the day after his 10th birthday. Sarah's room became his permanently, though he'd added his own touches: photos of his mother, his father, and Eleanor covered one wall, showing 2 families that had become one. 1 year later, Christmas Eve, Eleanor and Lucas stood in Riverside Cemetery. They placed wreaths on 5 graves: Michael, Sarah, and Timothy on one side, Thomas and Rebecca on the other. "We're all family now," Lucas said quietly, his voice deeper at 11 than it had been at 9. Eleanor squeezed his hand. "Love doesn't divide, Lucas, it multiplies." Snow began falling as they walked home hand in hand. Their house glowed with lights, neighbors already gathering on the porch, caroling. The table was set for 20: Jake, the Hendersons, even Robert Peterson. All welcome. Family wasn't about blood or law. It was about choosing to stay when leaving would be easier, about feeding the hungry, especially when that hunger was for love. Sometimes, when you save someone else, you discover they were actually saving you. This story reminds us that family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by the choice to show up every day with love and presence. Eleanor Sullivan, a grieving grandmother, chose to feed a hungry boy without asking for anything in return. Lucas Whitmore, a broken child, chose to trust again despite unbearable loss. Thomas Whitmore, a dying father, chose humility over pride, recognizing that love sometimes means letting go. Their journey teaches us that gratitude isn't just saying thank you, it's recognizing that every act of kindness creates ripples that can save lives. Lucas's simple thank you notes became a bridge to Eleanor's heart. Eleanor's daily meals became Lucas's salvation. Even Thomas's desperate search, flawed as it was, came from love trying to find its way home. The greatest injustice wasn't Thomas's wealth or Eleanor's poverty. It was a system that saw Lucas as property to be awarded rather than a child to be heard. Three broken people found wholeness not through courts or custody battles, but through the radical act of choosing each other. Have you ever witnessed a situation where legal rights conflicted with what was truly best for a child? When should love outweigh law in determining where a child belongs?